Hey folks, this is Philip with the Everyday Fighter podcast, where we share stories and insights from everyday fighters just like you. Today we're going to be talking with Tony Quinteros. Now Tony is a husband, a father. He is also a pastor for his church and a martial artist. Really excited to share my conversation with him today. He takes us on quite a journey in terms of his upbringing, getting into kind of the wrong crowd, hitting really rock bottom in his life and in his relationships, and finding a way to get back into life and love and a zest for just being here. So really looking forward to the things that you'll get from Tony. But before we do that, I did want to get into our episode spotlight. As a reminder, these spotlights are unsponsored. These people know nothing about me. They know nothing about the podcast, but they're just folks that I think it's important to share with you. And today I wanted to share with you the National Suicide Prevention Lifeline. Their number is 1-800-273-8255. Now, folks, I've never been there, quite frankly. I've never been in a place where I even contemplated not wanting to be here anymore. So I can only imagine what you're going through if you're in that spot or if you've been that spot before. But I can only urge you to reach out. I think having a resource like the Lifeline here, it's important just because you know that people really do care about you. And having a place where you can call in and speak to somebody, particular people that are not connected to you in any way, I think that really can help. I know there are times when I'm having challenges in my life, and I have some groups that I'm a part of online. These people, they don't really know me very well. We interact in different context as far as topics, etc. But sometimes I feel like I'm struggling and I need to reach out to somebody, and they're there. And one of the things that helps me with that is that they don't really know about every single facet of my life. So it's helpful for me. I'm hoping that's something that would be helpful for you too. So if you are feeling alone, if you feel like you need some help, maybe talking to somebody would help, and that's why we have the National Suicide Prevention Lifeline. Again, their number is 1-800-273-8255. That is our spotlight, folks, and with that, let us jump into our interview with Tony Quinteros.
Husband of four, married, be 29 years, but fighting pretty much has been since growing up little. Just even in the elementary schools. And I was reminiscing about this morning that I grew up in Azusa, California, in kind of like a little small area where within, I would say, a mile radius, everyone knew each other. Families were really close. You go to Azusa nowadays, and you hardly know your neighbors anymore. But back then, you knew everyone, every family on every street. So at that time in our culture, there was a transition of, integration with schools. And, back in the old days, you couldn't buy in a certain property. Let's say you couldn't uh, you couldn't buy property above Foothill. That was there was just different areas where you could buy. And as a Hispanic, we never had a victim mentality. But one of the interesting things was growing up in the street where I lived was the only street that when integration came in, we got bussed up into a more affluent area. So where we were going to school with kids that were a little richer than we were, and it was kind of like a little conflict. But I noticed myself getting into little scuffles as a young boy, often. But it was over the pettiest things. But I remember getting bullied and stuff in school and stuff, and that was it was part of growing up in our neighborhood. So it wasn't a bad neighborhood. It was a great neighborhood, but you know, fighting has been in my past since a very young age. But then growing up in the growing up and hanging out with older teens, I was hanging out with older influences in my life, like family members. I was pretty much still a sissy growing up. My nephews would fight, and one would over dominate the other. Then I jump in. I was one of those kind of fighters. But then I grew up, and I started hanging out with my cousins, who were very influential in my life, and they were some tough guys. And I was about 13, hanging out with 18-year-old guys, 18, 21-year-old guys, and my life had to change. I was no longer I couldn't be the sissy boy anymore. Well, they had to toughen me up, so to speak, and they did. But then I found myself getting in trouble. I found myself starting to like to fight. And then adding alcohol involved in all that. And, as a 13, 14, 15-year-old kid, all the way through about 26, it's really got into that where I was always looking for a fight. And fast forward, I had some changes in my life. I stopped drinking. I gave my life to Christ. He changed my whole life. Me and my family, we were in trouble. Me and my wife, we were at the verge of having a divorce, and so Christ came into my life and changed my life. So my life has a new meaning. I'm no longer that guy who goes out to drink and wants to fight. Kind of you get that beer courage. I no longer have that attitude, but martial arts was always a part of my life. Growing up in the 70s, my brother was a great Bruce Lee fan. One of the greatest memories of my life growing up with my brother, he passed away at 36 from alcohol cirrhosis of the liver. But growing up and seeing my brother grow up and do the same thing, fighting and drinking and martial arts. That's what he was, and he was a pretty neat guy. But I always remember him doing the nunchucks and the Bruce Lee pictures on the wall, and it was really cool growing up with my brother. So I kind of always wanted to have that fighting attitude, but it was very informal. So when I gave my life to the Lord and had some changes, I've had a couple of incidences where I was very put in a bad situation, and could have really got really bad for me and my family. We were shopping at the Alhambra Costco one day, and me and my wife, I had the day off. We went to shop there, got some stuff, had some lunch, hot dogs. Who can't beat a Costco hot dog on a great lunch? So we were there at Costco, and then we, did some shopping, headed down to the parking lot, and I noticed there's somebody in my car. And I had I believe my youngest son at that time, he was about 2 years old, and I was holding him, and we were walking in the parking lot, and there was somebody in my car in my trunk, and just without thinking, I ran up on him carrying my son, and I said, "Hey, what are you doing in my car?" And this could have got really bad, where the guy could attack me, and who knows. But I had that flashback of me going back into that fighting mentality to go and confront this man. But I really wasn't thinking, hey, I have a 2-year-old in my hand. So that kind of gave me that mindset, like, hey, I got to think about what I'm doing now. I can't just fight and just get into a scuffle without thinking. There has to be a better way of thinking, about thinking clearly. And so, that was kind of in my mind, hey, should I take some martial arts or something? Just, I have no problem fighting, but I don't want to be that guy I used to be anymore. This guy that just flies off the handle, but is kind of, I'm growing older. I need to be wise. I have a family. And so, martial arts was in the back of my mind from what was planted in the past. And then, I kind of had some eating problems and some dietary problems. Hereditary, my family has very high cholesterol, heart attacks. My two brothers had heart attacks when they were in their mid 40s. And so one day I was coming home, and I got really dizzy, and I went to my wife convinced me, hey, you need to go to the doctors. This ain't normal. I had vertigo. Never had that before, but it freaked me out. I thought I was going to die. So we go into the doctor's office, and they run some tests, and they said, they have you come back, and my cholesterol was off the charts. And she asked my wife, hey, do you guys eat good? And she goes, oh yeah, he eats great. And I had to confess, I work at Costco, so Costco pizza every day, and I get a burrito off the Roach Coach every morning, and it had, those burritos. What is it? A breakfast burrito with sausage and bacon and avocado, everything, you name it, sour cream. I got the works, and cheese. So my doctor told me, you know what, Tony, you're going to die. You need to diet and exercise. And I told her, well, I walk, I walk at work. I'm an auditor, so I'm always walking. She said, no, you need to break a sweat. And so, for me, the gym is boring. I'm not a big guy who will get on a treadmill and put on headphones and just run around for cardio. So I thought, hey, I like Krav Maga. I've heard of that. It's got an Israeli background. Where I'm interested in Israel. I've been there a couple times. I'm very interested in that. So, and just thinking about what's happening in the culture, and, things are changing. So I want to be prepared going back to that Costco situation. If something happens to me or my family, I want to think about what I'm doing before I do it, and have a plan, and be more skillful and tactful, and as well as observant. And so getting that mindset, that's when I looked up on the internet, and I found Chosen Martial Arts, where I met you. And that's when I took those free lessons, and I got involved, and because my doctor says you need to sweat, and man, that is a great sweat. That was a great sweat. So I found Chosen. I've been doing it for 3 years now, and I love it. It's been great. The Krav Maga is cool. The Muay Thai inclusion is cool. All the senseis have been a real blessing to me, but it's really given me a different perspective of fighting. It's no longer fighting, to destroy, but it's thinking clearly, having a plan. It's more um, taking care of myself, my family, my health. So it's really, martial arts has really affected me in a good way, not only for, protection, but also as a health wise. But it's been a great journey so far.
Wow.
Yeah.
Dude, lots of places I want to go on this one, but man,
Yeah.
you mentioned like kind of growing up, and you said like you grew up fighting, right? Particularly when you're like talking about like the kind of the integration. And when you're saying integration, it really was more about, because I hear integration, usually it's, back to the 60s, you got, blacks and whites integrated, that type of thing. But you experienced a bit of that here as well. Is that right?
Yeah, that's correct. We were in the more Hispanic area of town, and we were bused up to 10 blocks north of us to where we were kind of the only street in our whole neighborhood that was bused in that area. So it was a little conflict, but you know what? It was I met some great people there. I still have some great friends from there. And you know what? One of the neat things is, looking back, I still see some of those people I had problems with. They're actually my friends now. And, so times have changed. People have changed. I think that was the leftovers from an era past. We ended up going into junior high, and from it was kind of like an elementary thing. And then junior high just changed to where, man, I hung out with everyone. I could, hang out with, anybody from any kind of town. I really didn't have a particular clique that I hung out with, but yeah, it was a small experience in that. But, I was able to have some great, long-lasting friends through that.
Well, I mean, I don't. I'm curious about what you just said. Like that, it was a small experience because as you grew up, and you said you started doing this, being bussed in, etc., in elementary school.
Mm-hmm.
Did you understand what was going on at the time? That we're being bused, we're part of this integration process, or were you just like, oh yeah, this is just something that we have that we're doing now?
Right. No, I had no clue. I didn't understand it. Just looking back now, I was like, why were we the only street that was getting bussed in there? It was because the kids on the next street, they went to a totally different school, and they live really close to me. So
Yeah.
it was, we didn't think about it back then. I didn't think about it. But, looking back after, examining your life and what you've been through, you recognize that was just a little odd. But it sure changed my character. It molded and shaped me. Although some part of it was difficult, I could look back and I could see where it formed who I am today, and not in a bitter way, but in a positive way, in a way where I could look with empathy towards people going through difficulties in that area.
Well, I mean, you mentioned going up there and then having some challenges in the school,
Right?
And you said like you're fighting from an early age,
Right?
And was it because that these like people were resenting you for coming in on them, or what was the cause of kind of that conflict there?
Yeah, you know what? I honestly, I think it was like a little jealousy thing, a racial thing, but also a jealousy thing. I really wasn't one to provoke problems. So that's where I felt at odds. I run at the principal's office for safety, but
you mentioned jealousy. They were jealous of you.
Yeah, I think it was partly of that. I'm a great looking kid. I still am a great looking man today. No, I'm just kidding. No, I don't know what it was, but it was it had to do something with some kind of jealousy.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So
You know,
you had to learn. You were surrounded by. Were you at that time? Were you starting to fight back for yourself, or you were just this aggression was being inflicted upon you, and then you were like, okay, let me just go somewhere else. Let me go to safety.
yeah. Oh, yeah. I would want to go to safety. Yeah. Kind of just being bullied, and you want to go to a place of safety. But I think it was about sixth grade where I just said I had enough. Okay,
Mm.
I'm not gonna run no more. You
Mm.
know, um, it's funny. I just had one of the guys uh, saw me at a funeral the other day, and he kind of brought up the past, and he said, it's kind of mocking, and he said, "Yeah, you were the always the kid that used to run." And I said, "Yeah, that's me. That was me." I go, "But I don't run no more." You know, and one of the other guys was there, and he kind of laughed. But it's it's just, I guess it's just one of those things. You have kids who get jealous.
Mm.
At a very young age, I was very athletic, so I was always good in football and soccer and baseball. So part of that, you see that jealousy of talent as well. Yeah.
But it's interesting. Like, so I mean, you're not fully sure of what their motivations were for doing that.
Right.
But even
Right.
now, like you refer to it as kind of some kind of a jealousy there, not
Right.
necessarily racially motivated. Whether it was or not, you don't know.
Yeah. I don't know.
But
Yeah.
ultimately, you use the language of jealousy, which is interesting to me.
Yeah. Yeah.
I think to your point earlier that it that's just the way it was, right?
Right. Right.
That's very interesting.
Yeah. Or even difference.
Mm.
I was a little different than them.
Mm.
So
Because it
that could be
wasn't the people that you were being bussed in with that were picking on you. It was the people that
right.
were already living in that area.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah. So it was just kind of like maybe a culture clash or something.
Well, yeah, but I mean,
Yeah.
again, so like speaking to your, what you said, like as a child, you just know that you're being bullied. You
Right.
just know that you're having a hard time. You
Right.
don't know necessarily any of the potential socioeconomic issues around it. You just know, like, oh my gosh, they're on me again, and I
Right.
have to run and
Yeah.
recover again.
Absolutely.
What was that like for you? Because I mean, were you bussed in with your brothers as well, with your family?
No, actually, my oldest sibling is probably about 6 years older than me. So
Mm.
we weren't really even close in age. So we really didn't go to school in the same schools. So all my siblings were all grown up.
So, so
So
you're the youngest.
I'm the youngest. Yeah.
So you were at this new school by yourself.
Yeah. I had some older cousins, but they were in upper grades. So every once in a while I'd call on them and they would get the bullies aside and say, "Hey, don't be messing with my cousin." But nothing really ever transpired from that.
What was that like for you in terms of because ultimately, I mean, like I said, like your kid, this is just the way it is. You have to go to this school. Um, what was this something that you discussed with your parents, and what was that like?
Yeah, actually, you know, um, growing up in a broken home, my I think my dad left. My mom and dad separated when I was about three. So really didn't have those kind of conversations where my mom was a hardworking single mom who she worked early in the morning, get back home at late, and then she'd cook up dinner. And I'd be on the streets. I'd be playing till the news came on and said it's 10 o'clock. Do you know where your child is at? Things were different back then, man. We were out making cars and playing in the streets and doing all kinds of crazy things as kids. So I really didn't worry about it once I got home. it was, hey, let's go play, man. I'm going to go have a good time.
You're
So
back
really,
home. You're safe
yeah,
anyway. You didn't have to worry about it then. You left
right,
it behind.
right. So I really never really had shared that with my parents, you
Yeah.
know.
But I mean, on
And my,
top of that, though, like
yeah,
you said like your mother was working very hard.
very hard. Yeah,
I mean,
yeah,
I don't know if you felt
yeah,
like, well, is this something that I really want to bother her? I don't know, bother
yeah,
maybe, or
yeah. I think I just really put it past me. And then when I'd go down my dad's on the weekends, my dad was a great dad. You know, he loved to spend time with me. And it was Disneyland at my dad's house. So, you know, we were doing some great stuff, you know, going fishing and just hanging out, you know.
yeah.
I really would put all that aside. I really wouldn't think about it. So my weekends with my dad were great, and my evenings at home, man, were just my friends in my neighborhood were fabulous.
Well, you mentioned putting it aside, yet ultimately, you'd also mentioned earlier that sixth grade, you'd had enough.
Right. Yeah.
So, people talk about putting things to the side, putting things on the back burner, pushing it away, even trying to sweep things under the rug. There's only so much of that you can do
Right.
before things start sliding off the plate, before you start tripping
Right.
over that big old hump underneath the rug.
Right.
So
Right.
what was that like for you? Was there a point that you remember that things just turned for Tony?
Yeah. I really think it was tired of running. You know, tired. You know, we would hear that phrase, "I'll see you after school." You know, we're going to meet after school. And I just finally said, you know what? That's all right. Let's meet after school. You know, but that's when I realized they really didn't want to fight. It was all a facade, you know. So I think that was a confidence booster as well. You know, going into junior high, high school from there. So you know, things really changed, and I think I really had a growth spurt at that time too. So where, you know, I wasn't just that little guy anymore. You know, this guy is growing up. You know, his body's changing. I think during my sixth grade in the seventh grade year, I really had a really big growth spurt. So I don't know, maybe that was a factor.
Nice. Well,
Yeah,
it
it's
worked out
possible.
pretty
Yeah,
well. But there wasn't like a particular incident. It was just like, like how do you tell when like the glass is completely, full before it starts
right,
overrunning? It's just like, okay, that's just the way it is. Now it's overflowing. And that
right,
seems to be the case with you.
right. Yeah.
Interesting. So was it such that once you made the decision and you found that, whether it was one incident or multiple incidents where you just said, okay, let's do it then, that these people started leaving you alone after that? Or was it still continued, but not as frequent? How did it play afterwards?
No, actually, you know, after the end of the school year, you know, new friends, things just changed. Going into junior high, and it was just a little different. You know, I really think the kind of the demographics of my French changed. You know, we had kids coming from different schools, and it was almost a melting pot where, you know, getting into sports, Pop Warner, and all that, started to get to know other kids, you know, and it almost junior high was like a melting pot where we just hung out with everybody, and there was none of that clash of I guess that street. You know, these kids get bussed into this one school. It wasn't foreign. All the kids were coming from all the schools now, and it was just a big melting pot. So I really think that opened up my friendships to, you know, different races and cultures, and it was a really neat experience in junior high.
So it wasn't necessarily as separated as what you'd experienced in elementary.
Right. There was a big transition there where, you know, we were all hanging out. We're all on the same team, you know, sports. I really think too, sports really brought us together where we were teammates, and we benefited from each other. So
So
that was really cool.
you mentioned though, as far as like, even as part of that transition, and I mean, to use your word, you saw yourself as a sissy prior.
Right.
made the decision, okay, well, now I'm not going to be that anymore. And then you started hanging out with some of the older guys. Was that something that came very soon after, junior high started for you? Or was that something that you kind of like found yourself moving into later on? Because it sounded like it was a pretty great change from elementary to junior high.
Yeah, it was pretty good. I think the I never really had those problems in junior high as far as fighting. I don't even think I really even got in a fight in junior high. But my confidence level started changing around junior high, where I had a little more confidence because of sports, and I think that kind of raised my my ego or something. And then, the fighting really didn't start until high school, my high school years. So, but juniors high, I'm sorry, go ahead.
So what changed? What was that? I mean, was it again a similar type of thing where earlier you're thinking, okay, I've had enough. Now my cup is running over. Now a few years later, getting into high school, your cup is also running over, but not so much with being fed up by bullying, but now it's more of like ego and confidence and kind of some of that thing overflowing now.
Yeah, I really think that was a change where I started hanging out with older guys. It was out of that transition of junior high into high school. My grandmother passed away, and so when she passed away, I started hanging out with some cousins that were a little older from a different town. They'd all drove, and so just hanging out with them, and they were very confident guys. They were very charismatic, very popular. And I started hanging out in their circles, and they were the kind of guys where if somebody gave them a problem, they weren't going to back down. And so here I'm a 13-year-old guy hanging out with these pretty awesome influences of what I thought of my life. I was walking around at 13 pretty cocky, So so my high school years, I was pretty much, there was a change of, hairstyle, dress, man, I was like, John Travolta strutting down the street, that's kind of how I felt. I felt really good.
Now, you said, though, that they were also kind of instrumental in helping with your kind of change from that sissy to a fighter. And like almost to a point where it's, I mean, again, just from what I heard, that you're almost like kind of forced to be that fighter.
Yeah.
What was that like?
Well, it was, it was interesting just watching these guys in my life. They took care of each other. They protected each other, and I just wanted to be like them. So it was very influential in my life. But then you add alcohol into that mix, as a teen, that's when I really started getting into trouble. To the point where I was almost a liability for those guys. I remember one time we really got in a bad situation, but it was because of my confidence that I could fight, my confidence that they have my back, and then you add alcohol into the situation. I really think almost a liability for them, to the point where it was like, man, something needs to change here.
So. I mean, like you pointed out, like as far as the age, like that was kind of your life for a while, even to your mid-20s.
Yeah, till about I would say 25, 26.
Yeah.
Had that lifestyle. If somebody wanted beef, I didn't care how big you were. I wasn't going to back down. So. But again, not being as big, I would think of ways of, some big guy get on my face, I'd use a drink, spill a drink on him, first attack, and I wouldn't let up until somebody hopefully pulled me off. I've been in a couple bad situations where, just foolish stuff over somebody calling somebody a name in a parking lot, and I'm telling the guy that I'm with, don't let him call you that. And I'm here standing with 6 guys, and I'm saying, don't let him talk to you like that. And then we're all face to face, and then all of a sudden I'm fighting, and I'm by myself. And all these guys are gone, and I'm fighting like 5 guys, and it's like, oh man, I'm doing one of those running fighting things backwards, you know.
They cut their liability.
Yeah, actually, these were another group of friends.
Oh, another
you know,
group. Okay.
Those by that time, those guys had got older. They got married. You know, they were more mature. Okay. But I started hanging out with a younger group, more my age, and it was they were things had changed. You know,
yeah, so. different group, different loyalties, different
group. Yeah,
limitations.
Yeah, it's like, oh, we're all together. No, we're not. You know, it's like, you're on your own, buddy. Like, okay.
So what caused that change for you? Was there a particular moment that you're like, I got to stop this? I've got to, you know, were you sat down by somebody? What was the thing that pulled, kind of just pulled the lever for you to make a switch?
You know what? I really attribute it to, you know, that place I was in my life. You know, I was at that time, things have gotten so bad in my life. I got involved in cocaine, and cocaine progressed into methamphetamines. And, you know, I had this facade lifestyle that everything was cool, and I'm a cool guy. And then, you know, I got married. I 3 years into marriage, and, you know, I had my wife fooled for a little while, but she came to that point where she was tired. She was done. She wanted a divorce. We were separated for about 6 months, and things were really bad to where, in that lifestyle, that drug lifestyle, you know, I made some very bad decisions. I had people wanting to kill me because, you know, just burning people and just my bad behavior. And, you know, one day I came home, and my wife's, you know, she was done. She said, I want a divorce. You know, we were separated 6 months, but she said, I had it, you know, I don't want to be married to a junkie. And my son was 3 years old at that time, and she was holding him in her arms. And, you know, 3-year-olds repeat what they hear. And
wow.
He said, yeah, you're a junkie. And that broke my heart, you know, because it was true. It was true. I was out of control. And I really believe if my life didn't change within the next 2 weeks, I would have perished. I would have died because of the amount of drugs I was taking. My wife, you know, remembers that we would lay on the bed, and the bed would move because of my heartbeat was so, you know, so impounded by beating in my chest from the drugs. And so that night, you know, when I heard my son say that, my wife say that, I went out to the dealer, and I told him, you know what, I want a speedball. That's you know, John Belushi went out with a speedball, and I said I hear that's the ultimate high, and I want to do it. I just really didn't want to live anymore, so I wanted to take myself out that way. And went over to the dealer's house, and he said, "Go home." And how many times do you hear a drug dealer say, "No, that's not you. You need to go home"? And so I listened to him, and I went home that day, and I kind of slept it off. And 2 weeks later, one of my nephews called me, and he said, "Hey, I want you to go to church with me." And I said, "Man, I'm not ready. I'm not ready for that religious stuff." And he said, "No, I'm not taking no for an answer." And I said, "All right, well, can I take my wife and my kids with me?" You know, because I still wanted to get back with my wife. And he said, sure. So I think we all piled in a little Toyota Corolla and went down to Calvary Chapel, Golden Springs, and Diamond Bar, and um, heard the message by Raul Rees, and altar call comes, and a call for God to come into my life, and because I knew, man, I was going to die, and I just sat there, and finally my nephew said, hey, if you want to go up there and ask Jesus Christ to become your Lord and Savior, and just save you, basically from yourself and from your sin. And I said, I was at the point in my life where I said, what do I have to lose? And really, I didn't have anything to lose. I had no job. My wife was going to leave me. I was going to lose my family. People were going to kill me. And I said, what do I have to lose? And that night, August 9th, 1993, was an awesome night where I felt a supernatural peace in my heart. And I was no longer the same man since that day. And it's been an amazing experience. I got my wife back, my kids. I have 4 beautiful children now. My self-respect, so, and I attribute it to me realizing my own condition and my own need, and coming to terms with me needing a savior. So, so that was the turning point in my life there. So where I was no longer fighting against, I think really was fighting against myself. I was doing a lot of damage. But some of those people that I even burned that wanted to kill me, we had, before all this happened, one night, a couple guys came to my house, and I burned them, came to my house, and knocked on my door and pulled me out and jumped me right there in my the front of my house. My wife was pregnant at the time. I remember me running inside the house and getting my gun, and things could have really got bad. But after I gave my life to Christ, I even saw those guys, and they're my friends now too. So it's really amazing how God not only changed me in my heart, and he also changed them. And the guy that pulled me out of my house and beat me up, we're lifelong friends now. Our families know each other. We break bread together, and so God's doing a neat work in his life too. So I've seen some pretty amazing things,
dude. I was about to lose it there.
Yeah.
So as far as did you give any indication to that dealer of yours that was going to be your last night?
I don't remember as far as what I told. I just told him, I'm done. I'm tired. Because I had that struggle of I wanting to stop. Like I'd take, a week off of trying to do the drugs and then go back to it. But I think he realized at that time that I was tired, because he knew that wasn't my thing. I thought I was more of a sophisticated drug user than just, but I seen that took me from, partying in Beverly Hills to hanging out in the alleys. That's how far down I really went. But I really think he did see that was a moment where he needed to tell me. And I'm grateful for that. I'm grateful for him telling me go home. And one of the neat things is later on in life, he's since had passed away from cancer, but he came back and was always one of those friends that would call me for counsel and advice. But I'm really grateful for God for putting him in my life to say no that night. Because I would have lost the ultimate battle there. Yeah.
Well, that was like, I mean, a pivotal moment. I mean, I
Yeah.
would say for him as well.
Right. Right.
Seeing somebody there that has a
Right.
relationship with, the
Right.
type of relationship, whatever, you can say it, but he knew you nonetheless.
Right.
And he knew that whatever it was you were asking for, it wasn't for you.
Right.
And on top of that, in your nephew being
Yeah.
there to, because that's a special bond there with
Right.
an uncle and a nephew.
Right.
Typically, it's the other way around, right? The uncle is the one that brings them around. I know, I have my uncles, and they taken me to, share experiences and just help me become, like a greater man. Especially around
Right.
those types of as your formative years. For him to
Right.
turn that around and be the guide for you, what was that like
Right.
for you?
Well, it was pretty amazing because actually he was one of those guys that got caught up with me. We're only 3 months apart, my nephew and myself.
Okay.
So what happened with him is we had during the teenage years we had gone out to some parties, and we were one night he had that same experience where we went out to I think it was called Rock the Barn in La Puente. It was a party, and something happened, and again I find myself in that same situation where somebody over a girl or something like that, and there's a guy in his face, and I'm telling my nephew, hey, don't let him talk to you like that. And then here comes a big old brawl happening at this one party. Then he realized that night that he's not in a place where he should be, and he broke off a relationship with me, and he went the other direction. But before that happened, he used to work at Leather Fair in La Puente Hills, where the mall is. And one night he was in there. This was about a week or two after that fight that happened. One of the guys that fought with us that night walked in to his store, and he looked like he was packing. And he confronted my nephew, and my nephew said, "Hey, I'm not that guy no more. I've changed my life. I've given my life to the Lord," and that changed him. That was a pivotal moment in his life. So fighting has really changed our lives as far as our course of direction um, for the better. We
Absolutely.
realize where we were and where we could be, but we're grateful for where we are now.
Yeah. So I mean,
So
like,
he had a great change in his life as well,
yeah.
to where when I needed help, I reached out to him, and he was there for me, and
Well,
I'm glad he didn't give up. Yeah.
well, I think, I mean, in terms of, like, again, I still think there's kind of a shift there. I mean, you were the experienced guy in this kind of rowdy world, right? You're bringing
Right.
him into that a bit, because now
Right.
your older cousins and friends and stuff that are gone. Okay, well now who's my new crew? Oh, here's
Right.
my nephew here, still the same age, but more like you're like a big brother figure to him.
Yeah, we were like brothers, like
Yeah,
twins,
yeah,
growing up. So
yeah.
yeah. So but he realized right away, hey, we're headed down a slippery slope here, and he got off the bus quicker.
He got the hint much sooner
Yeah.
than you did.
Me, I was it's like catching the lure on the fishing line, man. I was gonna get hooked. Yeah.
So
So I got reeled in.
after you made the change for yourself, found your faith, you mentioned martial arts being kind of a part of your life. Was that something that you would kind of pursued actively, more formally, or was it when you started getting the health challenges that you kind of dove into more of like getting training?
Um you know what, I've always liked martial arts, but you know, once I think in my 20s, my focus, you know, after, you know, my life changed there, my experience with God, my focus was on my kids. And so, man, it was kids. It was little league, man. I coached little league, and it was great. You know, I was very active in my community and pouring out in my kids' life. And I think from 26 to like my early 40s, was the focus was my kids. So I really didn't really pay attention to my health. We did play some co-ed softball, me and my wife, and it was great times. But as far as taking care of ourselves, our focus was on our kids. So so when the doctor came and said, "Hey, you need to diet and exercise, man," I really had an even problem. I started walking because I realized, you know, there was something happened to me in that span from 26 to 40, early 40s. Man, I couldn't run like I used to run no more, man. I was super athletic. Um, I couldn't do anything no more. So I went to the track and I used to walk walk the curves and run the straights, you know. So it took me a little while just to even get to a place where I would even check myself into a martial arts academy. So that took probably about 6 months to a year just to get my body into a place where I could start conditioning it.
So, but you had the like the self-awareness that, okay, this is something that I want to do. I want to go down this route because running is not for me. I know that.
Right.
I have, you know, I'm interested in, you know, especially with, as you mentioned, times changing, you know,
Right.
particularly in terms of what you see on the news, et cetera, that, okay, it's probably a good idea to be prepared as well.
Right.
Well, that kind of comes together in self-defense and Krav Maga and that type of thing. So you start looking. You also mentioned, though, that, you know, you were already familiar with kind of the feeling of fighting.
Right.
Right. But then also aware that that's different than the fighting that you would be experiencing in kind of a martial arts studio,
Right.
you know, a martial arts training, that it would be much more, it would be refined,
Right.
in a sense. But was that something that kind of scared you? Because I mean, you were away from that world for a very long time,
Right.
and you were also in it for a very long time. Was that a concern for you that kind of the beast might come out a little bit?
You know what? I really didn't give it thought. But you know, looking at the kind of the karate style sparring, it was more of a glorified tag, except for when I sparred against you.
Oh, we'll talk about that. We'll sweep that one under the rug. How about that?
Yeah, almost to the point where I think when I had my first tournament, I think it was at the best of the best. I almost had a rude awakening because I had almost that dojo kind of glorified tag experience, to a place where I go to this tournament and I'm facing a guy who's, I would think I thought he was like 6'2". He was like 210 pounds. And here I'm a $150, 5'8". And, you know, he wasn't playing tag. So I think, by the time he got his third point, and kicked me in the head, I think it was like, okay, I got to step up my game a little bit more. So there was no more under tag. So,
Yeah,
but I think I was a little more controlled and thinking, and had some really good instructors as far as continuous sparring, such as yourself, and you know, looking for holes and you know, just learning a fighting of you know, this is the shock, having a shock hand, and then this is the power, and just like setting up and just the thinking of it and having a plan. Uh, um, was was a great transition. Not just throwing blows and having a brawl, but just having more of a plan against an opponent.
so even though, I mean, whether it's kind of as you said, like kind of a point sparring situation where you're just trying to make touches or something a little bit more stepped up.
Mm.
There was never anything. You still made a separation between that and what you had experienced before. So to somebody on the outside, they could just say fighting is fighting, right?
Mm.
Whether you're on the street brawling, alcohol involved or not, or even just this, where while you might have pads and gloves on, it's still fighting. But that's not the experience that you had through it all.
No,
It's very different.
very, very different. There's some guys that I've sparred with that, have kicked real hard, and I think that's still some of them in them, that macho, and I want to put you down kind of thing. And I still experience that. But it's very far and in between. I think
like
more
what
of
you experienced there is like what you might have had back in the day.
Right.
But
right.
now you're
Absolutely.
in a different place where it's like, oh, that you're not taking it personally necessarily.
Right.
You just know, okay, that's just something that, I went through that same thing. They're obviously still going through something similar.
Right. And, I really don't think there's that intent to hurt. I think it's that intent to win. It's pretty much more of an ego thing than it is a man, I want to tear this guy up thing.
That's a great distinction. Is really that intent, as you say.
Yeah.
So even like with winning, as hot and heavy as it could get in a kind of tournament or even like just training sparring situation,
mm-hmm.
the intent is still like kosher, right? You're not looking to hurt anybody. You're looking to get a goal, but the goal is more more of the prize, as opposed to, okay, this guy, I'm standing over this guy now, and that's
right. Yeah, I how would I say? I think it. I love it. I love it. It's a great experience. But it's one where I come from the perspective of, if I lose, let's say I lose a match, I don't really lose because I'm learning from it. I'm learning, hey, what to do if the fighter is taller, bigger, because it just seems like I get matched up with those guys a lot. They're longer, they're faster, they're younger. So it's, how do I use what I got to win or survive? As I'm going even into BJJ now, it's how to survive, even when things get tough, and how to stay composed. I think that has changed me in a bit, where I don't want to use too much energy. I want to use the right tools at the right time, and I really found that technique over just blunt strength is very important. And so the more technique, or the more I can learn, I really think as being teachable, learning from everyone I can, it's really been a benefit to me, because I think each sensei has pointed out different areas in my life to where it benefits me. But if I'm not listening, if I'm not being that student, a continual student, even of my losses, I'm going to miss out. So I try to learn from every sparring experience. So I go in it as a what to do, what not to do, what am I going to do next time kind of experience. So I think of it as lessons learned.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Tony, this was amazing, man. Look, I think the people that find themselves to this, listening to you, it's going to strike a chord to a lot of people. And if they would like to get more of you, to reach out to you, what's the best way that they could do that?
Email. My email is TEAKUE at yahoo.com. It's short for my name, Tony, Q, Quinteros, at yahoo.com. So TEAKUE at yahoo.com.
So awesome. And you're a pastor as well.
I am.
Yeah.
I am. I'm pastor for 9 years. I've been serving in ministry within Calvary Chapel for, I would say, 25 years. And it's an awesome experience.
Now, if they would like to meet you there, is that something they'd be able to do?
Oh, absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely.
And where is that again?
We are located in the city of Covina, downtown Covina. We're at 173 West Center Street. And we have services during the week, Sunday mornings, 8 a.m., 10 a.m., evening service, 6 p.m. We also have a Wednesday midweek service at 7 p.m. But I personally teach the men every other Thursday. So you could go on our website. It's cccornerstone.com and see our schedule for our men's fellowship. I teach a Bible study with the men's discipleship every other Sunday.
Awesome. Tony, again, thank you so much for this. This was amazing.
Thank you. You're a blessing to me.
Folks, I hope you appreciated that conversation with Tony. Man, it took a lot of energy for me not to just break down in tears hearing his story. I know Tony, right? I mean, as he mentioned, we go to the same gym. We train together. I know him in that context. I didn't know a lot of his background story, particularly those times when he was describing some really massive challenges in his life. And very, very honored that he was on and that he was willing to share so much of himself in an effort to help people out there. So that is it for today, folks. This is Philip with the Everyday Fighter Podcast. Talk to you next time.